Key signatures. Everything you need to know, and 3 ways to learn them all. Key signatures are a musical notation that indicates which notes are sharp or flat in a piece of music. For instance, the key signature for A major says that all Fs, Cs, and Gs are sharp. And the key signature for E flat major says that all Bs, Es, and As are flat. And it's important to note that the key signature affects all notes of that name unless otherwise indicated. And key signatures are pretty important because playing the wrong one can really change the sound of a piece of music. There are 15 major scales, which correspond to 15 key signatures. Being able to quickly identify and reproduce them all is an important skill for musicians. Not only is it crucial to understanding music theory and composition, it is immensely helpful for skills like sight reading and improvisation. There are basically 3 ways to learn your key signatures, and they all have their advantages and disadvantages. First, there's the 2 rules method, which seems to be very popular, but I think it's quite a bit more complicated than some people give it credit for, and you have to have the piano keyboard memorized, which can be a bit tricky for musicians who don't play the piano. Second, there's the chart method, which I think is much easier and takes about half as long to explain. But the main reason it's my favorite is because it has no exceptions or special cases. You do have to write it down to use it, but that does give it the added advantage of being a visual reference that you can glance at, which many people find helpful during tests and assignments. Finally, there's the Woodshed Method, which is by far the simplest and quickest to explain, and the best in the long term, but unfortunately it won't be terribly helpful for your test coming up in a few days. Before we jump into the first method, there are a few properties and patterns that emerge in key signatures that we need to be aware of. Looking at all 15 key signatures, you'll see that we can sort them into 7 keys with sharps and 7 keys with flats. There's just one, C major, that doesn't have any sharps or flats. Most people don't have a problem remembering that, so we can just take it out of the mix completely. Next, you'll notice a pattern in the sharp and flat keys. They all have 1 to 7 sharps or flats, and they are all written in a specific and consistent order. For the sharp keys, the first sharp is always F sharp in every single sharp key signature, and the second sharp, if there is one, is always C sharp. After that, the order is G sharp, then D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and B sharp. For the flat keys, the first flat is always B flat in every single flat key signature. And the second flat, if there is one, is always E flat. After that, the order is A flat, then D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. It's crucial to remember that they're always in that order and they always fill in left to right. You'll never see some random combination of sharps or flats, and definitely never sharps and flats together. It's always 1 to 7 sharps or flats, starting with F sharp or B flat and following the order of sharps or flats shown here. It's also worth noting that the sharps and flats have to be on these specific lines and spaces. You might think of it as a 2-3-2 pattern for the sharps and a 2-2-2-1 pattern for the flats. And it's the same shape in the bass clef, only lower. The shape is important because when you get familiar with key signatures, you can recognize them at a glance, and just like grammar and spelling, it's easier to read and understand when things are written consistently. You'll need to memorize the order of sharps and flats to make the next 2 methods work. Most people remember them with some sort of mnemonic device. A common one is Father Charles goes down and ends battle for the sharps, which also works backwards for the flats. Battle ends and down goes Charles's father. Or use 2 phrases that are memorable but don't necessarily go together, like flannel clothes get dusty after eating bread, and before even attempting dancing, get creative fashion. Or make up your own, make it memorable, make it weird. Like feral clowns, green dragons, and evil bunnies bake every afternoon despite gritty cake flour. Whatever works for you, as long as you remember the order. Now that the order of sharps and flats is out of the way, let's look at the 2 rules method for remembering key signatures. The first rule is the name of any flat key is the second last flat in the key signature, except for F major, which only has 1 flat. And the second rule is the name of the sharp keys is 1 semitone above the last sharp of the key signature. At first glance, it seems relatively simple, but the more you dig into it, the more it feels like trying to explain the timeline of the Star Wars universe. It seems obvious when you know, but hardly anyone nails it on the first couple of tries. Anyway, let's start with the flats. If you look at all the flat keys, you'll notice that the second last flat in the key signature is the name of the key. The second last flat of C flat major is C flat. The second last flat of G flat major is G flat. This works for all of them except for F major, since it only has 1 flat. So you'll just have to remember that F is special. like C major, and remember that it only has one flat, which is B flat. Because of this pattern, identifying flat key signatures is really easy. Just look at the second last flat and that's the key. This is G flat major. Writing flat keys is the same idea but backwards. To write a flat key signature, use the order of flats and write flats until you get to the name of the key, and then write one more. To write E flat major, write flats up to E flat, B flat, E flat, and then one more, A flat. To write D flat major, write flats up to D flat and then one more, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and then one more is G flat. Now let's take a look at the sharp rule. The name of the sharp keys is one semitone above the last sharp of the key signature. In case you didn't know, a semitone is just the direct next note on the piano keyboard, whether it's a white or a black key. So in the first key signature, there's just one sharp, F sharp. From there, go up a semitone to G, and the first key signature is G major. For the second, the last sharp is C sharp. Go up a semitone to D, and that's D major. For the next one, from G sharp, up a semitone is A, and so on. This rule works for all the sharp keys. Just be careful with the last two. Remember that E sharp is really just F on the keyboard, so up a semitone from E sharp isn't F, it's F sharp. And B sharp is actually C on the keyboard, so up a semitone from B sharp isn't C, it's C sharp. It's still up a semitone from the last sharp, so the rule didn't change, but musicians who don't play piano sometimes get mixed up with those last two. Again, writing sharp keys is the same idea but backwards. To write the sharp keys, go down a semitone from the name to find the last sharp from the order of sharps. For A, go down a semitone, which is G sharp. So we follow the order of sharps and stop at G sharp. To write B major, we go down a semitone, which is A sharp, and write the order of sharps until we get to A sharp and stop. But we're not quite done because there's actually one more rule. How do you know if you should be using the flat or the sharp rule to write a key signature? Identification is easy, because you can see the sharps or flats in the key signature. Just use the flat rule for the flat keys and the sharp rule for the sharp keys. But writing is different. If you're asked to write E flat or C sharp major, it should be obvious which rule to use. But if you're asked to write A major, it might not be. So the last rule, which is kind of a doozy, is if the key has flat in the name, use the flat rule. If it has sharp in the name, use the sharp rule. And if there's neither in the name, use the sharp rule, except for C major, which has no sharps or flats, and F major, which has one flat. So that's the entire so-called two rules method. It's quite popular, and feel free to use it if you like, but I find it rather cumbersome, and people often accidentally mix and match different parts of the rules. However, that doesn't happen so much with the chart method. This method has to do with learning how to create and interpret this device. It's really not as complicated as it looks at first glance, but it is super powerful because it shows the order of sharps and flats, all the names of the sharp and flat keys, as well as the number of sharps and flats in each one of those keys. It's almost everything you need to know about key signatures in one device. Let's look at how to write it and then how to use it. First, write the order of sharps and flats with whatever mnemonic you memorized. Flannel clothes get dusty after eating bread, and before even attempting dancing, get creative fashion. Second, draw a line to the right of both C's. Then, write numbers 1 to 7 starting to the right of the line, and just loop around when you get to the end. Finally, write accidentals to the left of the line, sharps for flannel clothes and flats for before even. Now, to identify a key signature, just count the sharps or flats and find the number on the chart. This has 2 sharps, so we find 2 on the sharps chart and see that this is D major. This has 5 flats, so we find 5 on the flats chart and see that this is D flat major. Let's try another 2. Here's a key with 3 sharps, so it must be A major. And here's a key with 2 flats, so it must be B flat major. To write a key signature, find it on the chart and then write the number of sharps or flats indicated. If we want to write E major, we see that it's 4 sharps, so we write the first 4 sharps in order: F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. If we want to write E flat major, we write the first 3 flats in order: B flat, E flat, and A flat. And that's it. No special rules or exceptions. Again, to write the device, just write the order of sharps and flats using your mnemonic device, line to the right of the C, numbers to the right of the line, and accidentals to the left. Once you get used to writing this, you can put it in the margin of your theory assignments in just a few seconds. And it has the added advantage of being a visual reference, which can be very useful for anyone with working memory challenges, or if you find it difficult to remember key signatures while you're also working through some other new music theory concept. And that is the chart method. Finally, the woodshed method. To go to the woodshed, or shed a piece of music, is an old term, particularly popular among jazz musicians, that refers to practicing your instrument, especially in a remote location where you can focus for a long time and wouldn't bother anyone or be interrupted. So the woodshed method is basically just that. Practice your scales and, just learn them. Now, don't be mad. The other two methods are good for music theory, but the woodshed method is also good for reading, technique, and ear training. It's probably one of the best single things an instrumentalist can do to become a better musician. Thankfully, there's only 15 scales. It's not a small number, but it is finite. If you learned one scale a week, you'd be done in just a few months. Imagine if you were going on a trip. You could probably learn 15 useful phrases in the local language. Like almost anything, it takes a bit of time and effort, but it is doable. Start learning your scales today and you'll be done before you know it. If you had started a few months ago, you'd be done by now. And those are 3 ways to learn your key signatures: the 2 rules method, the chart method, and the woodshed method. So, good luck with your key signatures and go learn your scales. Your future self will thank you. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and check the description for more videos. Thanks for watching.